What if someone told you that arrogance can cost more than any lawyer's fee? Today you will see how a single sentence in front of Judge Frank Caprio shatters a wealthy teenager's illusion that money controls everything. My lawyer costs more than your salary. Brandon Coleman drops the line like a mic on a stage, not even looking up from the glowing screen in his hand. 16 years old, he sits slouched at the defendant's table, designer sneakers bright white against the dull courtroom floor, a slim platinum watch catching the fluorescent light every time his thumb flicks across the phone. The jacket on his shoulders is a size too big, expensive fabric and subtle pattern, the kind of suit his father wears to board meetings and charity galas. Across from him, Judge Frank Caprio removes his reading glasses with slow, practiced care. Decades on the bench have taught him that haste is a luxury justice cannot afford. He folds the glasses, sets them on the polished wood, and looks at Brandon over the top of the frames with the kind of calm that makes even seasoned attorneys adjust their ties. "Mr. Coleman," the judge says quietly, "put the phone away." Brandon finally glances up. "Sure, Your Honor." The words sound correct, but the tone is all wrong. There's a smirk in the corner of his mouth, the lazy confidence of someone who has never seen a real consequence up close. He pockets the phone, but his gaze stays locked on the judge, measuring, weighing, challenging. His attorney, Marcus Westbrook, sits beside him in a perfectly tailored navy suit that probably costs more than Brandon's entire outfit. Westbrook knows this courtroom, knows this judge, and knows that his client has just set fire to a bridge he was planning to walk across. A faint muscle ticks in his jaw, the only visible sign of discomfort as he rearranges his notes without actually reading them. "Do you know why your lawyer costs so much money, Mr. Coleman?" Caprio asks. Brandon leans back, stretching as if bored. "Because he is the best," the judge continues as though the interruption never happened. "He costs what he does because he spent years in school, passed a difficult examination, and then devoted much of his life to learning how to protect people in rooms like this." Caprio's voice is calm, almost gentle. "Do you know why judges make less money than many private attorneys?" Brandon shrugs. "Because you do not negotiate as well?" There's a muffled exhale from somewhere in the back of the courtroom, the kind of half-laugh people let out when they cannot believe what they just heard. Westbrook closes his eyes for a heartbeat and opens them again, with the resigned calm of a man watching a slow-motion collision he can no longer prevent. "Judges," Caprio says, "accept that difference because we do not serve profit. We serve justice." He reaches for a thick manila folder near his elbow. "And today, justice is far more interested in your choices than in your father's bank account or your attorney's fee." Brandon's smirk flickers just for a second. He was told this was a simple hearing for reckless driving in a school zone, an annoying but manageable situation. Pay a fine, maybe deal with a short suspension, let the firm handle the paperwork, and get back to real life. Nothing in that story included a judge talking about justice like a personal debt coming due. Caprio opens the folder. The sound is small, but in the quiet room it feels heavy, like a door closing. Inside, instead of a single citation, there's a stack, printed pages, photographs, and near the top, a color still image clipped to a sheet with a paperclip. He removes the photo and holds it up so that only he sees it at first. It is a frame frozen in the harsh light of a car's dashboard camera. Children in brightly colored backpacks are caught mid-step at a crosswalk, their faces blurred by motion, one small body leaning instinctively backward as a silver sports car noses too close to the painted white lines. The judge studies the image for a moment before placing it face down on the bench where Brandon cannot quite make it out, but can see enough to know it is not just a number on a ticket. Before going further, the narration pulls the viewer in closer. The next 15 minutes will not be about a fine or points on a license. They will be about whether a teenager who has always believed he can buy his way out of trouble will finally collide with something money cannot move. And before the worst of the evidence even appears on screen, this is the moment to make a choice as a viewer. Stay and watch his arrogance dismantled piece by piece. Take a second now to subscribe and like, because what you are about to hear from that dashcam will make even the most confident person shift in their seat. Caprio sets his hands on either side of the folder. "Mr. Coleman, he says, your attorney may have told you this is about one incident, one mistake. He taps the folder once softly. What sits in front of me suggests something very different. Brandon tries to laugh, but the sound never quite forms. What? A speeding ticket with decorations? He says, aiming for bravado and landing closer to brittle sarcasm. The judge does not react to the joke. He slides the folder a few centimeters closer to himself, as if drawing the weight of it inward. This is not decoration, he replies. This is a record of choices you have made again and again, near a place where children trust adults to keep them safe. He lifts a single sheet from the stack, the paper rustling softly. And it is not where this story starts, but it is where your belief that money can shield you will begin to crack. Brandon looks at the judge, then at the barely visible edge of the photograph on the bench. For the first time since he walked into the courtroom, he stops moving. The next page in Caprio's hand is not a photo. It is a printout of a traffic camera log, dense lines of text that he does not bother to read in full. He has already memorized what matters. Over the past 6 weeks, the judge begins, the same silver sports car registered to your father's company has been recorded speeding through the school zone on Maple Avenue at almost the same time of day. He taps the page with a fingertip. Not once, not twice. So many times that the individual dates no longer matter as much as the pattern. Brandon shifts in his chair. Nobody got hurt, he says. People speed all the time. People do, Caprio agrees. Most of them slow down after the first ticket, especially near a school. He reaches back into the folder and pulls out a thin stack of copies, all bearing the same letterhead. These are not from the police. These are from Riverside Elementary. The logo at the top of the first page is a simple drawing of a tree with children reading beneath it. Underneath, typed in firm, measured language, Principal Catherine Rodriguez describes a silver car roaring through the crosswalk while crossing guards held up their stop signs, parents pulling their children back by the backpack straps. She wrote to the police 3 times, the judge says, each letter more worried than the last. He flips another page. Parents attached photos from their phones. Same car, same plate, same time of day. Brandon looks at Westbrook. The attorney's expression answers the question he has not yet asked aloud. Yes, the firm saw these. Yes, they filed motions. And yes, until today, those motions worked. You see, Mr. Coleman, Caprio continues, up until now, your life has trained you to believe that if a problem can be described on paper, it can be erased with paperwork. He lets the copies fan slightly in his hand, a small, meaningful gesture. Forms, filings, fees, signatures. Push enough paper, and the problem goes away. He sets the stack down beside the folder, leaving space in the middle of the bench clear. In this case, the problem does not live on the paper. He reaches into the inside pocket of his robe and takes out a small black device, no bigger than a thumb, unremarkable except for the way the room seems to lean toward it. This, he says, holding it between his fingers, is a copy of a dashcam recording from a parent who was driving behind you on one of those afternoons. A parent who watched his own child step back as your car surged forward. The air in the courtroom tightens. Sound seems to recede into the hum of the ventilation and the faint squeak of someone shifting on a bench. Brandon swallows. He remembers music turned up too loud, the thrill of the engine, the way the orange vest of the crossing guard had blurred in his peripheral vision. He remembers shouting, not the exact words, just the heat of them, the feeling of being untouchable behind tinted glass. He had not imagined that moment would exist outside his own memory. On that recording, Caprio says, you can be heard raising your voice at the crossing guard and at the people in the crosswalk. He does not repeat the exact phrases yet. The words themselves will come later, and they will hurt more when played aloud. For the benefit of the court and of your own understanding, I intend to play a portion of it. Westbrook rises halfway to his feet. Your Honor, may we approach before? No. The single syllable is not loud, but it leaves no room for further motion. This is not a negotiation between professionals over procedure, Caprio says. This is a lesson about reality for a young man who has been protected from it for too long. He leans forward and slots the small drive into the court's media system. A soft chime confirms the connection, and a black screen flickers to life on the monitor facing the courtroom. Frozen, there is the first frame of the dashcam footage, the same crosswalk from the photo, but this time ready to move, to speak, to accuse. "Mr. Coleman," the judge says, eyes still on the screen, "you have been very comfortable telling other people what their time and work are worth." He turns his head slightly, just enough to meet Brandon's gaze. "Now you're going to listen to what your own voice sounds like when you believe nobody can hold you accountable." He reaches for the remote, thumb hovering over the play button. The room holds its breath. For a heartbeat, everything is suspended. The judge's hand, the black triangle on the screen, the tension in Brandon's shoulders, the unseen children frozen in the path of a car that is about to move again. "And, just so we are clear," Caprio adds softly, almost conversationally, "this is only the beginning of what that camera captured." Then his thumb presses down. The video starts with the hollow thunk of a car door closing and the faint rustle of fabric as the dashcam microphone picks up every small movement. For a moment, all anyone hears is the steady rumble of an idling engine and the soft murmur of children's voices outside the frame. A bright orange vest flashes past the windshield as the crossing guard steps into view, one arm raised, octagonal sign held high, the word "Stop" filling the screen in flat red. Then Brandon's car surges forward in the recording, just enough to make the image jolt. From the speakers in the courtroom, his voice explodes, louder than it felt even in the original moment. "Get those brats out of my way," he shouts, the words distorted only slightly by the microphone, but sharp enough that every person in the gallery hears them as if he yelled at them personally. The crossing guard does not move aside. On the video, her gloved hand stays up, palm out, steady. Her reply is simple, calm, almost gentle. "Sir, please slow down. Children are crossing." Inside the courtroom, the real guard sits in the back row, unseen by Brandon for now. On screen, a small boy in a puffy blue jacket takes one hesitant step backward. The dashcam angle exaggerates the distance between bumper and child, but the tension in the room comes from something deeper than inches. On the recording, Brandon laughs. It is a short, dismissive sound, the kind someone makes when they believe they are above the rules being applied to everyone else. "Do you know who my father is?" his recorded voice demands. In the courtroom, the present-day Brandon stares at the table. His ears burn as though the words were being spoken for the first time. He remembers the feeling behind them, the surge of importance, the certainty that a last name and a lawyer could push any obstacle out of his path. Hearing them now, stripped of context and swagger, they sound smaller, meaner, and much more permanent. Caprio lets the video run 10 more seconds. On screen, the parent's car brakes, the camera tilts, and the silver sports car finally rolls to a reluctant stop inches before the crosswalk line. There are no screeching tires, no near collision, no physical impact, and yet the image is suffocating. The judge presses pause. The frozen frame holds Brandon's car at the edge of the white stripes, children mid-step, the orange vest a bright barrier between impatience and vulnerability. "This," Caprio says into the silence, "is what your voice sounds like when you believe you are untouchable." He turns from the screen to the defendant. "This is how you speak to people whose job is to keep children alive long enough to grow up." The word "alive" lands without graphic detail, but its weight is obvious. Nobody in the room needs to hear a worse outcome described to imagine it. The judge ejects the drive and sets it down beside the paper stack with almost clinical precision. "Now," he says, "let us talk about how we arrived at this moment." He picks up a thinner file, this one from the department that tracks moving violations. 47 citations linked to vehicles under your father's company name over the past years, he reads. Not all yours, but enough overlap that your license number appears more often than not. Brandon's head jerks up. "Those were dismissed," he blurts out, voice too loud. His gaze flicks to Westbrook again, seeking confirmation, grounding, rescue. "Every one of them," Caprio agrees. "Not because they did not happen, but because highly skilled attorneys found ways to erase them from official consequence." His tone never rises, but the words tighten like a noose threaded with legal terminology and quiet fury. He sets the violation report aside and lifts another set of pages printed from a glowing screen. This is how you presented yourself to your school and to the institutions you hope will accept you into their programs, he says. He reads aloud a line from an application. Honor roll, debate club president, volunteer at a local food bank, mentor to younger students. On the monitors, new images appear. Screenshots of social media posts, smiling photos of Brandon in a blazer, captions about charity drives, quotes about responsibility and leadership. The montage looks like it belongs in a brochure. Then, the sequence cuts, abruptly, to other images. A party in a dim room, Brandon with a red cup raised like a trophy, someone off-camera spraying foam while he shouts into the lens. Another shot of him leaning against the silver car, hand held up in a rude gesture toward whoever is filming. A still from security footage in a public restroom, blurry but clear enough to show him scribbling something obscene on a tiled wall. Social media is a curious thing, the judge says. People use it to build a story about themselves. One carefully edited clip at a time. He looks from the screen to the defendant. But stories have a way of colliding with what is left outside the frame. Westbrook no longer tries to interrupt. He knows that arguing about admissibility will only make things worse in the eyes of everyone watching. Here and on any screen, this story eventually reaches. In this courtroom, Caprio continues, we care less about the version of you that appears in photos and more about the version that shouts at crossing guards and children. He gestures toward the frozen image on the monitor, where the car is still suspended at the edge of the crosswalk. Because that version holds a steering wheel, not a certificate. Brandon feels something heavy press against his chest from the inside. It is not the shame of being caught in a single bad moment. It is the realization that several parts of his life, his driving habits, his social media persona, his polished applications, are about to be read as pieces of the same story. The judge steps away from the bench. He walks toward the window that overlooks the parking lot and points down. Do you see that green car with the rust on the door? He asks. That car belongs to a woman who stands in front of your speeding vehicle with nothing but a reflective vest and a sign between you and the students she protects. Brandon follows his gaze. The car is ordinary, the kind of vehicle most people forget as soon as they look away. But from this angle, with the judge's hand indicating it like an exhibit, it becomes something else. A symbol of all the lives that do not come with private attorneys and sports cars. Her name is Patricia Chen, Caprio says. She works more than one job to support her family. On the day recorded by that camera, according to multiple statements, you did not just shout about brats and fathers. He pauses, letting silence pull the next words into sharper focus. You referred to her as a minimum wage obstacle. The phrase hangs in the air, as ugly and revealing as any insult the court has ever heard. Brandon flinches. He remembers saying something like that, tossed out the window with a laugh, an exaggerated sneer for whatever friend might retell it later. Hearing it now, stripped of tone and context, it sounds like a verdict on his own character. Mrs. Chen, the judge says, turning toward the gallery, thank you for taking time away from your work to be here today. From the back row, a woman rises. Patricia Chen walks down the aisle with small, measured steps, the same way she walks across crosswalks every afternoon, never rushing no matter how impatient the cars might be. She still wears part of her crossing guard uniform, the orange vest folded neatly over one arm, the reflective strips catching the fluorescent light as she moves. Up close, she looks older than Brandon expected. Not because of age lines, though there are a few near her eyes, but because of the kind of tiredness that comes from years of showing up in the cold and heat for other people's children. Mrs. Chen, Caprio says gently, if you are willing, please tell the court what you remember from that afternoon. She does not look at the judge when she begins. She looks at Brandon. When the light changed, she says, I stepped out with my sign, like I always do. My students started across in front of me. She holds her hands apart as if spacing children in an invisible line. Then I heard an engine. Louder than usual. Your car, I believe. She nods toward him, not accusatory, just precise. I saw it move forward even though my sign was up, she continues. A boy near the front stepped back, and I raised my hand higher. One of the parents behind you sounded the horn. She breathes in through her nose, slow and controlled. And then you shouted. She repeats only part of the words. Get them out of my way. You asked if I knew who your father was. Her voice does not shake. She has told this story before in written complaints and quiet conversations. What stayed with me, she adds, was not your father's name. It is the first hint of emotion in her tone, not anger, but something sadder. It was that you said I was in your way. She looks down for a moment, then back up. My job is to be in the way, she says simply, in front of any car that does not want to stop. There is a subtle shift in the courtroom. Even those who arrived ready to dislike Brandon feel the weight of that line. The story has moved beyond tickets and attitudes into something more fundamental, what it means to stand between harm and those who cannot defend themselves. Thank you, Mrs. Chen, the judge says. You may return to your seat. She nods once and walks back the way she came, just as steadily, just as quietly. When she sits, Caprio turns his attention fully to Brandon. Stand, please, he says. Brandon rises. His legs feel heavier than they did when he strolled into the courtroom wearing his father's jacket. This court finds you responsible for reckless endangerment in a school zone, the judge declares. Not because of one moment caught on camera, but because that moment fits a larger pattern of disregard. He does not reach for legal jargon or complex phrases. Instead, he sentences in plain language each condition like a step on a path Brandon never imagined taking. You will perform 120 hours of community service at the Riverside Veterans Shelter, Caprio says. You will work under supervision, not as a guest, not as a donor, but as staff. Your tasks will include cleaning, serving meals, and any other duties the staff assigns. You will surrender your driver's license for 6 months, he continues. During that time, you will move through your life at the pace of your own feet or the patience of those willing to drive you. You will deliver a public apology to Mrs. Chen, to the parents of Riverside Elementary, and to the students who walked through that crosswalk believing the adults around them valued their safety. And finally, he says, the legal fees your family has paid for this case will be matched by a voluntary contribution to a scholarship fund for students of Riverside Elementary, to be administered independently of this court. He pauses, then adds one more condition. You will attend a program focused on empathy and responsibility, and this court will receive reports on your participation. The gavel does not fall yet. Instead, Caprio studies the teenager in front of him. You told this court that your lawyer costs more than my salary, he says. Today you learned that there are things more valuable than either. Among them are the trust of a community and the knowledge that when you stand in front of someone vulnerable, you are not there to threaten them. Only then does he lower the gavel and bring it down in a single measured strike. Court is adjourned. The story could end there, at the satisfying moment of judgment, but transformation does not happen in the instant a sentence is read. It happens in the days after, in the places that do not have cameras and wood-paneled walls. 30 days later, Brandon stands in a hallway that smells of disinfectant and old coffee. The floor beneath him is scuffed, the kind of wear that comes from boots, wheelchairs, and years of traffic heavier than any sports car. He pushes a mop bucket toward a common room where sunlight filters through blinds in thin stripes. Today, he's not wearing designer sneakers. He is in plain work shoes that squeak when the tiles are too wet. An older man sits by the window, his left hand replaced by a mechanical prosthetic that flexes with small whirring sounds as he adjusts a worn paperback. He watches Brandon for a moment, then smiles faintly. You are the kid from the papers, the man says. Brandon freezes with the mop halfway through a stroke. I guess I am, he answers. The veteran nods toward the floor. You almost scared one of my granddaughter's classmates off their feet that day, he says, with no anger in his voice, just fact. I know, Brandon replies. I did not think. Most people who hurt others did not think far enough, the man says. Thinking does not clean the floor, though. Effort does. Brandon looks down at the mop, then back at the man. For once, he does not argue, does not joke, does not reach for a name or a number to shield himself. He simply nods and goes back to work, each push of the mop a quiet concession that he is here because of his choices, not in spite of them. Later, at the front desk, he pauses before signing out for the day. The receptionist glances up. Do you know who runs the scholarship fund, Mrs. Chen is involved in? He asks. The question surprises even him as it leaves his mouth. The receptionist blinks, then nods slowly and writes down a name and number on a scrap of paper. That is not part of your requirement, she says. Maybe it should be, he answers. Outside, rain taps against the pavement in a steady rhythm. Brandon steps into it without a hood or umbrella, letting the cold drops soak through his hair and jacket. He walks, not drives, down the sidewalk, passing crosswalks where other guards in other vests hold up their signs. For the first time, he does not see them as obstacles. He sees them as people standing in the way on purpose so that someone else can keep moving. The story does not claim that he becomes a different person in 1 month, but it does leave him in a different place than where he started. No longer convinced that money is a shield, but beginning to understand that real value often stands in front of you holding a sign you once tried to ignore. Dramatization for storytelling and education, not legal advice or reporting.